Welcome back. If you're like me, you're constantly worried about being a good parent. Am I making the right decisions for my child, for my family, for myself? Next, you'll hear from Blyth Lord. Blyth is the founder and executive director of Courageous Parents Network, a national nonprofit whose mission is to empower, orient, and support parents of medically complex and seriously ill children and the clinicians who care for them. Along with two Dravet syndrome parent ambassadors, Blyth will lead us in a discussion about finding your voice and confidence as the good parent that you are. This is a research-informed discussion about what matters most to parents of medically complex children and how to work with clinicians and others to support your role as advocate and decision maker for your child.
Hello, I am Blyth Lord, the founder and executive director of Courageous Parents Network. I am really delighted to be here today to speak with you as part of your virtual conference for the Dravet Syndrome Foundation. It is particularly meaningful for me because when I was starting Courageous Parents Network, one of the very first parents I met with to just talk about the idea and sort of throw things out there and ask advice from was a woman by the name of Barbara Sawyer. Her son, Jake, is now in his mid-20s. He has several conditions, but the primary one is Dravet syndrome. And she has been, I know, very active in the Dravet community and has been active with Courageous Parents Network and a really wise voice of counsel and feedback and a contributor to me personally. So I feel that this is in some ways come full circle to be here with you today. The topic today is centering the good and with a focus on how to, not how to, but the notion of finding your voice and confidence as the good parent to your Dravet child and other children, if you have them, that you are. I come to you in my capacity as the mother of 3 children. My second daughter, Cameron, was diagnosed at age 6 months with Tay-Sachs disease, infantile Tay-Sachs, which is always, and is still fatal in early childhood. And as I'll share with you in a moment, she died at the age of 2. And so much out of that was, needless to say, a very difficult, excruciating in some ways experience. But as we know, part of what happens to us as parents is that there's a lot of beautiful good that comes alongside what is so difficult that we learn as parents to these children. And we are ever and always becoming. And Courageous Parents Network came out of that. In my work at Courageous Parents Network, I have the privilege of meeting parents and their children who are living with all sorts of rare conditions. Some of them have certain prognosis. Some of them have uncertain prognoses. Some of these children are living still in their 20s, despite perhaps what the doctors told the parents at diagnosis day. Some of them have uncertain diagnoses. Some of them, when I meet them, are actively caring for their children, and some of them are bereaved. So everything that I share with you today is, yes, it began with my own story, but really much more so is the product of what I've learned from the many, many parents that I and my team at CPN have met along the way, as well as the clinicians that we work with all the time, the pediatric clinicians, some of whom are specialists, some of whom are primary care. My daughter Cameron and my nephew Hayden, my daughter's there in the middle, my nephew Hayden, both had infantile Tay-Sachs. They were diagnosed within 2 weeks of each other. My nephew was a year and a half. He'd originally been diagnosed as having cerebral palsy. And my husband and Hayden's father are identical twins. And when I learned that Hayden had Tay-Sachs and I went and read about it, I assumed my husband was a carrier, and and I knew that I was in the at-risk population because my grandmother was of Ashkenazi Jewish descent, and they are in the high-risk population for carriers. And it was very statistically improbable, but absolutely what happened, obviously, is that we were four parents in one family with these two children who all four parents were carriers of this mutation. I'm the only one who's had a mutation that they'd seen before. My husband and his twin had a spontaneous mutation, as did my sister-in-law, who happened to have been my roommate in college. So it was this extraordinarily unusual thing that happened to us. And in its way, it made everything that followed possible and bearable, because we traveled that road with my brother and sister-in-law. We were not alone. And you in the Dravet community know how powerful it is to be in community with other parents just like you. Our situation was particularly intimate because it was my brother and sister-in-law. Hayden was a year older than Cameron, and Tay-Sachs has a very predictable disease trajectory. So everything that happened to Hayden, we could anticipate what happened to Cameron. And some of the things that Tim and Allison learned along the way, my husband and I were able to say, wow, that didn't work for Hayden or Tim and Allison. Let's make sure that doesn't happen to Cameron or us. And so we learned so much from them. And we also did so much together, including conversations around medical decision making. In our instance, because the disease is so fatal neurologically, we decided not to give our children feeding tubes. And both of our babies died. Hayden was 2.5 when he died, and Cameron died 6 months later when she was just a few days after her second birthday. And I will say that the fact that my husband was present at Hayden's bedside for his end of life was a huge thing for me, because he was able to tell me what that was like and what it could be like, and that we were going to be okay, despite how that we could bear the unbearable. And I was able to see my brother and sister-in-law afterwards, and I could see that they had not spontaneously evaporated in their grief. And that really did make everything that followed bearable. And I, as I say, was able to live and breathe into the last 5 months of Cameron's life. And I feel that everything that we learned through these two children, including the value of palliative care and how it helped us, and the value of grief counseling from diagnosis onwards, really made our journey one of minimal regret, which really allowed for uncomplicated grief and a tremendous amount of healing and peace in the years that followed. So in the years that followed, I really threw myself into understanding what it is that parents who are parenting children living with serious illness need. And I came across the notion of the good parent. And what that really means is parents want to feel they are being the very best parents they can possibly be to and for their child, with the information they have and the context they are in. This is true for all parents of all children, neurotypical, healthy, medically complex, or not. Parents want to feel they are being the very best parent they can possibly be for their child. And so, but the notion of the good parent actually originated in a clinical medical setting. A nurse, PhD, named Pamela Hines, was doing research with children living with cancer, and she was asking them about their experience. And they said, well, why don't you talk to our parents? Our parents are very much a part of this too. So she started to interview the parents, and in her conversations with them, there were where they tag themes that come up. She kept hearing this term, good parent. I want to be a good parent. And so she began to dig deeper. It's important to flat note that the term good parent was generated by parents. It's owned by parents. There is no such thing as the opposite. It's not like if you're not a good parent, there's a bad parent. It's what does it mean to feel like you're being a good parent to your child and other children? It is intended for inclusivity. It is very unique for each and every parent, each and every family. In her research, some prompts were, please share with me your definition of being a good parent for your child at this point in your child's life. Please describe for me the actions from the staff or doctors or nurses that can help you in your efforts to be a good child. And then in orange, you see some of the themes that came up from parents are what it means to be a good parent are doing right by my child, being there for my child, conveying love to my child, being a good advocate, letting the divine lead, not allowing suffering, and making my child healthy. The good parent research has really been embraced by researchers, and it has evolved. It's been done by families in the ICU. Dr. Hill in 2019 just learned that parents change their beliefs over time. What it means to be a good parent changes over time. This is not a surprise. Dr. Robinson did research with fathers, and then Dr. Weaver did some research with parents to look at how it was that clinicians could help parents honor their intentions. And we're going to look at that in a moment. So before we look at some of the things more specific, I want to flag that we live at a time when there are things working against families in their effort to be a good parent. These things include the parental instinct, which is, it is my job to keep my child safe. And if something happens, I've failed. Now, that is true. This is natural to what it means to feel like we are being the best parents we can be. But it is true that we can't always keep our children safe. And there are things out of our control. And when those things happen, to feel like a failure is obviously not helping us. And in fact, of course, not true, but it is what instinctively we think. We also live in a country where we have a framework of winning, fighting, conquering, individuality, and self-sufficiency. And some hospitals, such as the one where I live, used to have had the taglines until every child is well. And we all know that some children will never be entirely well or ever well. And those taglines are not helpful. Looking quickly at the inner psychosocial emotional landscape of parents caring for children who have a serious diagnosis. Some of those ingredients are a feeling of helplessness and a lack of control. This is a quote from Elaine Pagels, who wrote a beautiful book, memoir called Why Religion Matters. How could we go on living having so little control over what matters most? Parents also worry that their child's quality of life will be misunderstood, particularly by clinicians or people who don't know their child or family well. This is a quote from a parent. They don't see what my child is like at home. They don't see the smiles. They only see my child in the emergency room when something's happening. And most children do not smile in the hospital, but they don't know what my child is like at home. Also a concern that the parents, are misunderstood. I am not an angry parent. I am my child's advocate. I'm not an angry parent. I'm just afraid and fearful for my child's well-being. Then there's the notion that their fear or concern that they will be misunderstood. If I cry, it will make me appear weak. If I advocate or push back with the medical team, it will alienate them. And we know from the research and just the times that we live in, which have revealed that parents of color who have been historically disenfranchised have received poor goal concordant care and symptom management. So that is especially true for them. Also, there is, of course, the frustration that the care their child is receiving is problem focused, like something's wrong with it's symptom focused, or let's fix this, as opposed to looking at the whole child and the whole family. And then there is fear of failing their child. This is another quote from parents we've met through Courageous Parents Network. We felt we had to show our daughter that she had picked the right parents, which is just beautiful and dear, and also fairly loaded for those parents. And then forever, there is this notion of guilt. It is my job to keep my child safe. And when some parents of children living with medical complexity or born with a condition feel guilt, and they feel guilty if they are not able to keep their child out of the hospital or comfortable at all times. We know, of course, that one should not feel guilty, and part of what we're going to be looking at is how to abate those things. But it is just a natural part of what it means to be a parent. When our child is not well, we immediately wonder, what have I done? What could I have done differently? Megan Weaver, who's a palliative care doctor and researcher, furthered the research of Pamela Hines to look at the role clinicians could play in fostering good parent beliefs. And the areas in green are of note, because these are things that I hope you either have happening with your child's medical team and the people in your network and community. And if you don't, you can perhaps learn from the research, which originated in research with parents of children living with medical complexity and illness. These are the things that parents said help them feel like they were being good parents. People who truly see my child, people who communicate with me in kind and caring ways, and people who acknowledge my role as the expert in my child's care. And then those yellow circles are going into a greater level of detail. Here are some provider behaviors that parents in the research reported as impeding their ability to reach their good parent definition. Poor communication with parents, not engaging from a place of empathy, not listening, not seeing the big picture or recognizing the impact of treatments on the entire family, and not valuing the parent's expertise or wishes. Perhaps some of you have experienced this either from your child's medical team or from people in your community. And I think it's important, part of this presentation is putting things out there so that you can see by reading and listening what the research is showing about what helps and what hinders. And by knowing, putting it out there of what helps and what hinders, my hope, our hope, is that it can help you advocate for those things that help and advocate for stopping the things that are hindering, or asking the people that are getting in the way and practicing those things that hinder to perhaps change the way they're interacting with you. So centering the good for yourself. Here are some things. Dr. Julie Hauer and Jory Bogutz and a mom named Liz Morris, her son Colson, had a mitochondrial disease. They co-authored a paper which was recently published just this past August in Pediatrics called Asset-Based Healthcare for Children with Severe Neurological Impairment. And these are some of the things they identified as how to help parents center the good. Celebrating inch stones is wins, like little victories, which can even be a smile, a good day with a smile. That's a win. Celebrating the positive outcomes of your caregiving. For example, you and your child have not been in the hospital for months. That's awesome. Or your child is having a good time at school. That's awesome. Or your child's interaction in the community, in your family, is just your child feels happy, seen, understood, self-actualized in themselves, and your other siblings. How is the whole family unit working? How are the other children feeling as equal? You know, your child with Dravet may be requiring more of your attention, but of course, all of your children deserve attention, and you yourself are working at making your other children feel seen and heard, and making them feel like they're being awesome siblings and that they're getting as much of you as you can give them. So how's that going? Of course, focusing on your hopes. What are your hopes for your child? What are your hopes for your children? What are your hopes for your family and yourself? And then there's this last one, asking your caregivers and friends and family to help you live in a meaningful present, which is all we have, while anticipating perhaps a difficult future. So not being future focused, really focusing on the here and now, while saying, you know, we're not denying what the future may hold, but we're really focused on where we are now. And you can ask people in your community, your child's medical team, your friends, your family, other people in the Dravet community to align themselves with what your hopes and wishes are as your child's advocate. Because what we know at Courageous Parents Network is really feeling like you're being the best parent you can possibly be for your child is what it means to feel like you are being your child's advocate. That includes, as we saw from the research, truly seeing your child, communicating in a kind and caring way, and acknowledging you as the expert in your child's care. So you can go to your people and say, I need you to see me as my child. To truly see my child. I need you to acknowledge me as and my spouse as the expert in my child's care. And I need you to communicate with me and my child in a kind and caring way. I hope you will explore Courageous Parents Network, this is a screen grab. We have a large digital library of videos of parents talking about what it was that has helped them feel like they are being the best parent they can possibly be for their child, including around medical decision making and coping with their the diagnosis and tending their marriage or partnership, tending their other children, managing extended family. And for some families and parents, it has involved transitioning to end of life and navigating bereavement. We have a huge digital library with all sorts of resources, videos, podcast guides, including some interviews with Dravet parents, particularly Barb and her husband John with their son Jake. So I hope you'll explore them. I'm aware in the interest of time that I just wanted to share some quotes from moms. So I'll go through this very quickly. We'll leave it on screen for a few seconds. But this mom really, the point of this quote is that for this mom whose daughter had a progressive condition, being a good parent for her daughter eventually meant saying no to some medical interventions. And this mom, Christy, had 2 children with a rare condition called Batten's disease. She has 3 children, but 2 of them had Batten's, and they passed away in their teens. And this mom writes about how she didn't realize she was courageous. She didn't used to, and this is probably true for you, like being told she was a good mother, because she's like, I'm just doing what I'm dealing with the hand I was dealt, which is these children with these conditions, and I love them to pieces, and I'm going to do whatever I can to give them the best care and love and life possible. You do everything in your power to help them. But in fact, you are courageous and you are a good parent by showing up and doing that. And it never, ever, ever, ever hurts to give yourself a pat on the back and acknowledge that what you're doing is courageous. And in this instance, the mom said, she realized that a day with smiles was a good day, and suggested that was a job well done. I'm going to just skip over this video in the interest of time so that we can hear from the other parents. But this is a video that you can find on Courageous Parents Network, where a mom actually talks about how she knows she will have peace knowing she's done everything she possibly can for her child in the time that she had. And I've met this mom since her child died. And it is true that she had 2 children with a rare condition, different mom. And I have met her since both children have died, and she has no regrets. And it's because she knows she did the very best she could with them, and she made different decisions for each of them. And because she saw each child as the individual that they were, she advocated for them exceptionally. The medical team came to understand that when mom said X was the way it was going to go. They respected her tremendously, and they made way for her. And she's really proud of the beautiful life she gave her boys. And finally, this is a quote that I love very much. It's actually a poem called Late Fragment by Raymond Carver. This is me with my daughter, Cameron. And I love this quote because because for me, it captures everything. Did you get what you wanted from this life? Even so, I did. And what did you want? To call myself beloved, to feel myself beloved on the earth. I like to end it here because at the end of the day, it's not that complicated, which is that being a good parent is really about helping our children feel seen, heard, and loved. And we can do that. And we can ask people to help us do that and get out of the way when they're not being helpful. Courageous Parents Network has an app. We hope you will download the app. I hope you will visit the site. And I encourage you to email me directly if I can help you in any way, or we're a team of 8 at Courageous Parents Network, and we are really here to help and listen. And if you want to contribute your perspective, your child's story, your family story, or give me feedback on this presentation, I welcome that feedback. And I hope you will, again, sign up, and I hope you will download the app. All right, I'm now going to stop sharing and turn to our guests. So I'm here with the experts, the Dravet mom experts, or the Dravet parent experts, Shannon and Austin. Thank you for agreeing to participate and provide your perspective as the parents that you are. If you could each briefly introduce yourself, your family, your child, and then I'll ask you some questions. Shannon, can you go first?
Sure, thanks. I'm happy to be a part of this for Day of Dravet. My name is Shannon. I have 3 children with my husband, Blaine. We live in Atlanta. Our oldest, Elena, is 17, and she was diagnosed with Dravet when she was about 4.5 years old.
Thank you. And Austin?
Hi, yeah, I'm so grateful to be here and participate. My name is Austin Watson, and my family and I live in Boise, Idaho. We have 2 children. One is Owen Watson, and Owen is, and he is my child that has Dravet syndrome, and he was diagnosed at 13 months old after starting to have seizures at 3 months without illness. So it was completely unexpected. And then we have another little girl who turned 6 today, who is neurotypical. So.
And your camera froze just for a second. Owen, I think, is now 9, right?
He'll be 9 in October. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let me just start, Shannon and Austin. In what you just heard me say and share from the research and from what we've learned with Courageous Parents Network, what would you say resonated most about what you heard from your own experience? And Shannon, let's start with you, just because you've been at this the longest, Elena being 17 now. What would you say resonated in particular with you about this idea of being a good parent, and what has helped you be a good parent?
Well, I think, whether it's a Dravet child or any child, we all want to hear that we are good parents, whether we're hearing that from family or outsiders. It just makes you feel like you're doing the right thing. I struggle as much, honestly, with the 2 siblings as I do my Dravet child in terms of making sure that we're making the best decisions for them and applying the proper discipline and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's that much harder when you bring doctors and teachers and therapists and all these other people into the picture that are getting a glimpse into what everyday life is like with your child. And, sometimes they're seeing the good and how hard you're working. And sometimes no matter what you are doing, what they see when you're in their office or their setting or school may not look like you're doing a good job. And that can be frustrating because you feel like they're judging you and thinking, oh, what are these parents doing? When in reality, they have no idea how hard it is just day by day to get through and do the right thing for your child.
And for Shannon, when in those instances, are there things you do to help them see, like, don't judge me in this moment, because let's just be clear, at home or in the big picture, here's what here's what Elaine is really like, here's what our family's really like. Do you get into it, or do you just say, not my problem what they think of me?
Yeah, no, I think at times you're kind of defending yourself and saying, oh, well, normally we wouldn't just be letting her play on the iPad the whole time, but because we're away and we're not normal setting, we're letting her do this just because it's easiest. If we're at a meal or at somebody else's house and things like that, or if she's hitting me and beating on me, I try to reassure people she's not always like this. Sometimes she's really sweet.
Austin, how about you? What did you feel? What resonated with you?
I think one of the parts that that we as a family really try to do to help ourselves feel like we are those good parents is by helping to cultivate our team around us. And a lot of the ways that we do that is we've joked before that us as a family, my husband and I in particular, have created this brand for ourselves where the doctors know that when the Watsons are coming, we're going to ask a lot of questions. So our appointment times are generally longer than an average patient may be, because we have built this brand of working with our providers and asking questions and, hey, we saw this, what do you think? And creating this dialogue between them so that they see us as parents who, just a second.
I think there's Owen, right?
That's Owen. Yeah.
Owen can come into the frame.
You want to say hello? No.
Okay.
And so we've really worked hard to make sure that not only do our providers see our child for who they truly are, but they see us as well, and adding that we've created a trust between us. And like you had said about one of the other parents that you talked to, that this mom, whatever mom says is what is going to happen. And we feel really fortunate that we've been able to pivot with different providers to find a provider that better fit with how we communicate, so that we could have that better dialogue. And so that's one area that we feel especially proud of, that we've created this brand as the Watsons, as a family nucleus of asking questions.
Mm-hmm. I think you named something really important there, which is you deserve and need not just the best medical care in terms of attention to your child's symptoms and physical needs, but like clinicians who respect and recognize all of that. And if you aren't getting that, you get to try to find somebody else.
Correct. We live in a pretty small area. Boise is not very large. I mean, there are many cities that have a larger population than our entire state. But what that also affords us is that we're able to speak to different providers specifically and say, hey, I need somebody that can help me with X, Y, and Z. Who might you have that we could talk to? And they may not know the answer, but they'll have somebody else that will. And that's something that, even though we live in a small area, in a small city, we're able to connect with other providers in different states or different cities, or that kind of part. Did you want to say hello?
Hi, Owen. Shannon, how about for you in terms of finding providers who really who work for your family, work for your child, work with you?
Right. So the first neurologist that we had, it took 4.5 years to get a diagnosis. And granted, it wasn't as common back then, but looking back, we realized he should have been able to figure it out sooner. So we stuck with him for a year or so after that. And then, he wasn't really supporting us when we would come with ideas that we got from other parents, from attending Dravet conferences. We'd come back and say, hey, we want to try this med. And we didn't really feel like we were getting the support, and he wasn't taking the time to learn with us. And so we ended up switching to a different doctor. And we're fortunate that we have a really good relationship. And kind of like Austin said, he knows us well. I joke that we have a love-hate relationship because, he loves that we're passionate and that we're involved and that we share a lot of information with him. But then I think at times he's kind of rolling his eyes like, oh, here she goes again. She has another crazy idea of something else she wants to try. So we're fortunate that we have that relationship, but I think it's really hard because child neurologists are hard to come by anyway. And especially if you don't live in a big city, your options may be limited. And, even here in Atlanta, we have a lot of neurologists, but they're difficult to get appointments with, and they're respond when you need medication refills. And it's just endless stress to have a neurologist that you can count on, not only them, but their entire office staff. And I think a lot of people end up settling essentially and finding a neurologist that kind of is just okay, but doesn't necessarily provide that kind of partnership that you really need. And like Austin was talking about. So, and unfortunately, if you don't have a doctor you're comfortable with, you're probably not going to be comfortable speaking up and saying, I need you to do this. I need you to do that. It's a lot easier if you feel like you have that mutual respect. But if they're just kind of rushing you in and out, then you don't feel like you're getting what you as a parent need out of the appointment to help your child.
Yeah, you name something really important, which is that it is hard to advocate for your child if you feel like you're not having a healthy dialogue or being allowed to communicate effectively with the other person on the other end of that exchange. And part of what it means to advocate for your child is to have people who are listening. And because as I say, advocating is fine. Advocacy involves finding your voice and using your voice, but your voice only works if somebody's listening. And so it is a vital piece of this equation is to find people who will help you advocate for your child. So if you don't, so for those people who might not have a neurologist who they feel is a helpful, partner in this, do you have suggestions? I know you're both ambassadors. Do you have suggestions for who else can be another resource to help you advocate for your child and advocate for your family? Teachers, child life, spiritual chaplain, family member. Are there who else might be part of that?
And I think the biggest help is just having the Dravet community, having other parents that you can, even if you're in the Facebook support group, even if you don't post and ask a question, you can learn so much just by other people's experiences. It's hard, especially if you don't feel like you have the family support. And even if you do, the family isn't going to the doctor's office with you. So, I would say if you don't have a neurologist that you have that relationship with, the next step would be find a great pediatrician who's willing to help and advocate with you and understand, because that pediatrician can play a vital role too in your child's overall well-being, not just managing the seizures.
Yeah, and the benefit of the pediatrician is maybe that pediatrician is also the pediatrician of your other children if you have them, and then they understand the whole family and how all the pieces fit together. Mm-hmm. That I love. I think the primary care pediatrician is a vital player in the big picture. I love that suggestion. Austin, what do you have suggestions?
So one of the things that I have found that a lot of hospitals have are care coordinators that are specifically there to help you navigate different aspects of your child care. I talk to ours on a very regular basis. She helps to coordinate appointments if I need help. She helps to work with some of the insurance issues that we have. She somehow was able to get some medical equipment covered by insurance that we had been told previously would not be covered. That's been a really great point of contact for us. And I know that a lot of hospitals have that. And I all started with a question: is there someone in the hospital that can help me coordinate my child's care between our specialists and our PCP and all of the therapies? That was one person that we were really grateful that we pulled in, and she's kind of like a social worker that just helps to organize that part of it. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes that I can offload and take off of my plate. And like Shannon said, I am going to completely echo the primary care physician. And like you had said, Blythe, all four of us see the same primary care physician. And so she knows us very intimately and is able to support us, say, oh, did you need a script for that? You can't get a hold of your neurologist? Let me send that off. And one of the other great resources we've had is particularly in the last 2 years with COVID and the pandemic, is Owen's classroom teachers. They have able to help support us educationally above and beyond what a teacher should be expected to do. And they do it because they believe, like we believe, that every child can learn, including our children with profound difficulties. And then additionally, I've created a network of friends that I can call up and say, hey, Susan, I've got a really crazy week. Is there any way that you would be willing to bring dinner one night? Mm-hmm. And a handful of friends that I've connected with over the years, and they know that they can do the same for me, or that vice versa, reciprocal. And even if you only have that one person that you can say, I need milk. Are you running to the store today? Mm-hmm. You think you could grab that for me? There's just no way I can leave the house today. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing that I've learned in getting support is to ask the question. Mm. Because if you don't ask, you'll never actually know the answer. And there's always going to be two answers to the question, the one you want and the one that you don't want. And a lot of people say, well, anything I can do for you. It's kind of okay to test that sometimes, because what you find is those people that mean it and those that say, well, maybe not. And that's okay, because then you protect your own boundaries and you to develop your own perspective of, no, what am I trying to say here? Part of what being a good parent to me means asking for help. Mm-hmm. And if you don't ask, you won't know the answer. And so, and it takes a lot of courage to ask. And it's very humbling to ask. Because as you had mentioned earlier, there is this culture of self-sufficiency. Mm-hmm. You're not an island. You're not. And you can't be, particularly in our world.
I love that. I really love that. It is just part of being a good parent is to get all the resources you need, however you need them, and not being afraid to ask for help. I mean, I'm older than you guys, and I have learned that there is grace in asking for help. And Lord knows that a lot of people have written about that. And I've been reading those books because we need permission, especially as moms in this country, to ask for help. We need permission to ask for help. And in fact, not only do we have permission, but it should be, we know that we can be and should be encouraged to ask for help. Shannon, what have you found? What are there things that you can identify a name that have been obstacles for you, whether it's in a particular day or a bigger picture obstacle where you feel like, ooh, I feel like I'm doing a bad job right now, and just because we think it's helpful to normalize those things, just like what are the things that get in the way of your feeling like you're being a good parent, and do you have any hacks for working around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the day to day, you know, when things don't go the way you planned, when you open up the cabinet and realize, oh, I'm going to be out of Onfi in 2 days and I forgot to call it into the neurologist, and it's a Thursday and they close at noon on Friday and they're not responding to your messages. And it's, you know, just the keeping up with everything, I think, is what's so stressful. The last thing we want is for our child to run out of medicine. And it's a lot. I mean, even with typical kids, there's a lot to keep up with. And then you add in the medical complications and the potential for a seizure every time you go out, and that just magnifies it all. So, I mean, I don't really have any great hacks. I think, you know, we're all just doing our best from day to day, and hopefully learning from our mistakes. When we do something and it doesn't work out the way we planned, or it doesn't help our child, like, okay, I'm not going to do that again. Let me try to do better next time.
Love that. And how about you, Austin? Anything that you would add to that?
I think Shannon hit it. It's that day-to-day, those day-to-day moments when you're battling a meltdown, or the meltdown after a meltdown after a meltdown. And it's really easy to not feel like you're doing a good job.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to take one of the things that you said in your slide is remembering to celebrate the inch stones.
Yeah.
That it's him coming over to the camera and smiling.
Mm-hmm.
It's him saying no thank you to a bite of food instead of throwing it. It's also remembering that self-care is not selfish.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to feel like you're not doing enough.
Yeah. I think I'm going to gender stereotype here, but the research backs us up. Women and mothers especially are very good at feeling like we are not doing enough and that we are not enough. And it's completely untrue. We have only to look at what each of you does over the course of a day and then a week to marvel at what it is that we do. And that is actually why I think it's important to be objective about it and to say, look at what this mom is doing, or look at what these moms are doing. And actually, you're doing that too. And if she's amazing, which means you're amazing too. And not being afraid to also ask for the respect that comes with that, and giving yourself permission to ask for that recognition. I will tell you, I never had to do that myself, because it's a lot easier to talk about it after the fact than when you're in it. So I don't remember whether I'm being completely honest, I don't remember whether I had days when my daughter was living where I felt like I was doing a great job. I don't remember. But the work I'm doing now, these years later, and I have 2 other children, and they're now in their 20s. I'm also in my life, like you guys, in the rest other pictures of my life. And I'm learning through this research and the stuff that I read and that the community is pouring out, like to be proud of little things. A mom told me recently that instead of a to-do list, we should have to-da lists. So we all know we have our daily to-do list. Well, what about like ta-da, at the end of today, guess what I did? Today I made the bed. I emptied the dishwasher. I got my children to school. You brushed your teeth. You might even have taken a shower. Ta-da! And that's freaking great, right? And those we need recognition for that, if only from ourselves.
I think the whole concept of pride itself can be a very difficult topic for a lot of people. There's a whole lot of the imposter syndrome, where it's difficult to actually see that the little things that you do are warrant a level of pride and a level of self-assurance to say, yeah, I did that. I folded and put away my shirts today. That's what I did. And that deserves a moment of that prideful reflection, and something that I personally am working on, because I'm not very good at that whole idea of being proud of what I'm doing or what I have done. That's something that I am continually and actively working on as my own individual self. So I love the idea of a to-do list. I think I love that idea. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I heard it and I was like, oh my God, it's brilliant. Yeah, Shannon, anything else?
Well, I was just going to say, a lot of special needs parents, social media is a wonderful thing and a terrible thing, right? Because you struggle with, what do I share? I don't want to see I'm complaining all the time that life is so rough and my child has it so terrible and they're struggling. But then on the other hand, you don't want to just post like everything is roses and have people think that, you're not even really, none of that stuff is real. None of that is really happening behind the scenes. So the thing that bothers me is like, I like to put out there something great that Elena did, like a good day, like Saturday, she went to the homecoming dance and it was a struggle to get her there, but she went and had a great time. And it's things like that I hate putting stuff like that out there, because then everybody's like, oh, you're such a wonderful mother and you're such great parents and all that. And I'm like, don't tell me that. I want to share the positive with you, because it's, it may be an inch stone. It may be truly like, we're just celebrating that she had a great day and she had fun. I don't need that gratification for me. I just want people to celebrate with us for those things that are going on in her life. And so I'm always like, stop telling me I'm a great mother. We're all doing the best we can, and, advocating for our kids and trying to give them the best possible life, one day at a time. Live, like you said, live in the here and now and make their life as happy as possible, and so that they know they're loved.
Yeah. Austin and Shannon, I think that is a good place to end it. Thank you so much for contributing what I know is very precious time in your precious days to this conversation and Day of Dravet. And I'm inspired by you, again, hearing about you and your children, and imagining them in their life and you there. And hopefully we get some good questions from others and we can help them think about how to foster the good parent beliefs that they deserve to have, and the confidence we all need to get through each of these days with as many to-dos as possible.
Yeah. So it is an honor to have you here today. And I'm also glad that we have Austin and Shannon back for this Q&A portion. And I wanted to say, what I'm seeing in the chat is that the sessions really resonated with our community, and the comments are really kind of around the theme of, we all want to be good parents, but we really doubt ourselves sometimes. And you spoke beautifully to that, but is there anything else you wanted to add?
Well, I guess I would just say that we doubt ourselves as good parents for any child. Like, it's not just about parenting a child with medical complexity. I think it's part of the definition of what it means to be a parent, period. And because I do that with my two children who are healthy and neurotypical, I doubt myself all the time. So I think it's sort of the nature of the beast, actually. And that we lose when you're parenting a child who's got particularly demanding needs and depends on you more than in different ways, you think you put more pressure on yourself, even though the pressure has always been there. And you just have to realize, like, oh, this is just what it means to be a parent. And that perhaps I could take the pressure off. I mean, it's a little bit of a head game you're playing with yourself. I mean, it's really between you and yourself. And take the pressure off yourself with whatever you can do. And, I remember I was talking I'm going to make a leap, Marianne, if I may, but I was talking about this in the context of parenting children who have cancer, where parents are making decisions around obviously a much different situation, but like some of those decisions around to continue treatments and chemotherapies that make the children be very, very sick. And I was asking a psychologist about how you help parents who are making decisions like that, and parenting in that intensity, you know, steer clear of regret and the head games that parents play with themselves. And she said, if you can put everything in the context of intention, what is your intention in that moment? What is your intention in that day? And assess your intentions. And if your intentions are probably what they are, which is to do the best you can in the day that you have with the resources you have available to you in that moment, then you can see, oh, I'm doing as good a job as I can do. My intentions are based in love. And so that, like, even though the house is a mess, or my kids are screaming, or I didn't get the aid that I wanted because maybe I didn't advocate hard enough. Well, you probably just advocated as hard as you could. And like nothing else was possible that day. So you did the best you could, your intention. So that's what I would say.
I love that. I've said to parents in the past, because we deal with so many unknowns, even when it comes to treatment, is that, you know, don't be so hard on yourself. We all do the best we can do with the knowledge we have at that time. And our parents would do anything for their children. And so I love to hear that someone else had said that as well. I think this particular quote in the chat really resonated with me from Barb, and it's a little long, but she wrote, "I think as our children get older, our vision and interpretation of what being a good parent means shifts and changes.
Yeah.
I also find that it sometimes feels that outsiders start to understand less. In many ways, we are increasingly trapped and isolated, especially if our child lives at home. As others move on, they watch with sympathy, but sometimes I feel they wonder why we can't do more to get out of our situation, as if we choose to remain devoted to our child at our own expense." So I just wanted to get your take on that.
Well, and Barb and I have talked about this. I think, you know, how the definition changes over time, which is a little bit different. I mean, that was part one of what Barb said, and part two is sort of something else, I think. But part one is what I've noticed and what parents of children who are older have said about how their definition changes over time. And also the good parent research. One of the papers looks at how the parent's definition of being a good parent changes over time. It really evolves if the children are older, like, you know, in their late teens, early 20s, the way, for example, your son is and Barb's son Jake is. What I've heard from other parents, not necessarily Dravet parents, is that the pressure you put on yourself for your kid just lightens up in a lot of ways. Like, you're no longer all the pressures to get your kid all the therapies and all the interventions and do the 500 things that the doctors are throwing at you. It loosens, because you have perspective that comes with time, which is that a lot of that stuff is just either not doable or not all doable at the same time. And nobody knows the reality of the situation or the reality of your child the way you do. And so you start to go easier on what you demand, what you're asking of the care plan in some ways. I think that's what I've heard. And that you sort of get maybe mellower about what you expect of a day. Now, let me just say, I'm 55 years old and I no longer have a child with medical complexity. And I've also gotten mellower about what I expect of a day. So I think some of that's just age and maturity and the wisdom that comes with years. At least I'm like, you know, I ask less of myself every day than I did 10 years ago. And then the second part of what Barb was saying, the isolation that comes as people sort of, that feeling separate, it must be, I wonder, and I really can't speak to it at all, but I wonder whether it is that people come towards us when we are in acute moments, but if we're not in an acute moment, if we're not in a crisis, if Barb is home with Jake and things are stable as they mostly are, and Barb is so competent, and John, for example, are so competent, and that people aren't rushing towards them because maybe they feel that Barb and John just don't need them because they're fine.
Right.
They're fine. I wonder about that. I'd be interested to hear what, I think Shannon, you've been at this for a while, what your perception is about that.
Hey, everybody. Great to be back with you all. Yeah, I mean, I think all of us as parents, regardless of whether it's a Dravet child or a typical child, it's hard and it takes courage and it's a lot to balance and keep up with. And I think the way we all cope is very different. Some of us just go through the day and, we do it. We don't need a whole lot of encouragement and support. And for some people, they really need like those cheerleaders, somebody to say, hey, you've got this, you can do this. And I think it's just really important for us to find what works for us each individually and find the support system that we each need to help us get through the day to day.
Yeah, I would agree. We did have this question that came in ahead of time, and I thought it was interesting because I actually know this family. So I know the age of the child she's referring to, and he's only 5. And I feel like I could have written this as well, even though my son is now 22. But she said, I just really feel like a failure some days and that nothing I do is what's best for my son. How can you keep your confidence up when you can't do anything right or are always second guessing your choices?
So I think Austin and Shannon should, I'm going to answer very briefly, which is what makes her think, why do you think that what you're doing isn't right for your child? Like what makes you say that? How do you know that's true? Maybe that's not true.
Okay.
In fact, it probably isn't true.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. I think there's some days though that we as parents just feel that we've tried everything and have not been able to come up with a solution that's improved things, and you just hit that wall.
Yeah.
And I still do that even though my son is so much older, but I would be curious to see what Shannon and Austin have to say as well.
Well, and can I just say that I also think that there are some things that we can't fix in that moment, like a seizure, the body, the brain is the most humbling, the central nervous system, like that is beyond a mother's love, right? Like when the CNS is doing something, we can't control it. And figuring out how to surrender to that and then still without being defeated by it, I think is the challenge.
Mm-hmm. Shannon and Austin, did you have any thoughts you wanted to add?
Sure, I'll jump in. As I said in the recording, it's really easy to feel like you're not doing enough. It's really easy to let those untrue thoughts creep in and to believe them, but they're lies. They're lies. And I'm gonna I think some of that has to do with the complex PTSD that a lot of us go through as caregivers of children. You're repeatedly living this trauma, and so you're repeatedly listening to these voices in your head that are liars. And one thing that I try to do is something that Amanda Stansfield said in her session earlier, and is also something that my neurotypical daughter's therapist, counselor shared with us, which is the 5-4-3-2-1 method. And it's 5 things you can see, 4 things. I don't even remember what it is, but if you go back and listen to Amanda Stansfield's presentation, she talks about how you're tapping into the logical mind by separating yourself from that emotional fight or flight, anxious mind. And that's something that I'm trying to integrate for myself and for my daughter, because she's experiencing similar traumas as we are as caregivers. And so that's something that I personally am working on. When I hear those lies that we all tell ourselves, I didn't do enough, I raised my voice when I shouldn't have, I XYZ, fill in the blank. is rerouting myself to that logical mind to say, this is your anxiety. This is not real. Let's focus on what is real.
I think that's a great point. We just don't give ourselves enough grace as parents. We all put in 150% towards our kids and still end up feeling bad when things aren't going the way we'd like them to. So I think that's
Correct.
Good advice.
And then we don't always take care of ourselves either. Are we drinking enough water? Did we get enough to eat ourselves? Did we get any sleep? And then that adds to that, and it just compounds and builds. And if you can't take a second to break that cycle, whether that's walking, taking a walk, drinking more water, it's really easy to fall into that pit and yeah, fall into that pit.
And get stuck there. Yeah,
exactly.
I agree.
And I think we all really go through seasons too with our children where the focus of what is the challenge at the time changes. So, for most of us at the young age, it's the status seizures and stopping it and keeping them out of the hospital and keeping them alive, frankly. And then as they get older, it may be other things. And I think, for us right now, probably the biggest struggle is behavior, like 10 seizures a month that self-resolve. Okay, not a big deal, but we want to be able to manage her and not have her driving us crazy. And so I think it's like, if you have a rough day in one respect, you kind of need to take a step back and think, okay, you know what, we may be struggling here, but hey, look, the child's doing really well in this regard. Maybe we're doing something right over here. And so, so many of these things are out of our control anyway. So I think it's just important to really take a step back and look at not only what the struggles are, but look at what things are going well and where our kids are having gains and if they're happy and enjoying life, then we don't need to beat ourselves up over the day-to-day stresses.
Right.
I did when I said, I love that, Shannon. When in my remarks, I can't remember, did I mention the to-do list?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just think that's just because in the ideal world, you would have people validating you as a parent, and that's kind of what you want. And I'm thinking back to what Barb wrote, like Jake's in his mid-20s. So people have probably stopped validating her and John as much as they deserve, and certainly as much as would be helpful. And that may be true for you guys too. So kind of have to validate yourself, which is what Shannon is saying. Like, what have you done today that was great? Like, or, just.
And I love what you said with that list, because for me, some days a shower would be a ta-da, right? Because we get so wrapped up in the other thing. It doesn't have to be this great, big, stupendous win. It just has to be something that made you feel like you were able to function and do your best that day. And
I also think, like, when I'm thinking about the behavioral issues that can come with Dravet, and there's another mom I know who actually works with me at CPN. Her son had a Sanfilippo syndrome, and he went through a period where for 3 years he almost slept like 4 hours a day. That's all he slept, was 4 hours, and he would be running around the house, and it was impossible. And this mom, she said, like, it was all I can say, it was 3 impossible years. Like, there was actually very little we could do except wait for it to pass. Like, we could not fix this because it was what his disease did, what his condition did. And we had to just get through it. And sometimes that's probably what it is. Like, this is impossible. And we'll just wait until it's over.
And just take it day by day.
Yeah, because sometimes if it feels impossible, it kind of probably, it's not impossible because you're going to do it, but it is difficult. And just be honest with yourself. There's nothing wrong with you when you think it's difficult. That sounds incredible. 4 hours of sleep in 24 hours, night after night. And all she could do was keep doing it until it was over.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, you might not be able to reach out to those immediately around you, like friends and family. They might not get it, but definitely if you go back to our support group, everyone is more than happy to help validate that you really are doing your best. And I would encourage parents to take advantage of that, as well as talking to someone who is walking the same walk as you, and there's no judgment. It makes a huge, huge difference. So
you guys are so lucky with your group. So lucky.
We really
so
are.
lucky.
Well, Blythe, I wanted to thank you again. We were so glad to have you be a part of this today. I know that Erin tucked the link for Courageous Parents Network in the chat, or if anyone has any questions or wants to get in contact with you, if they watch this on demand, they can always reach out and we'll connect you. And just thank you again for being a part of this today. And thank you, Shannon and Austin, for sharing your experiences as well.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I will go back to where I started at the beginning, which is so much of this. I have learned so much from Barb. So I do feel very particularly close to your community, and I think you are amazing parents. You are not just good parents, you're great parents.
Thank you.